The hidden meaning of Leviticus, living holy in today's world. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, it really does help us build the channel. Leviticus is often one of the most misunderstood books of the Bible. Its detailed laws and rituals can seem strange or even overwhelming to modern readers. But hidden in its chapters is a powerful message about God's holiness, how He wants His people to live, and the path to spiritual restoration. Today, we're going to break down the book of Leviticus and discover what it teaches us today. What is Leviticus? Leviticus is the third book of the Bible, coming right after Exodus, and it serves as a manual for God's people on how to live in a way that honors Him. While Exodus tells the dramatic story of Israel's escape from Egypt, Leviticus focuses on the next step, what it means to live as a holy community set apart for God. Its name comes from the Levites, the priestly tribe, because much of the book is addressed to priests and explains their role in worship, sacrifices, and teaching God's laws. But the book isn't just for priests, it's for the entire Israelite community. Every rule, ritual, and law was designed to help people live in a way that kept them in right relationship with God and with each other. Leviticus can feel challenging for modern readers because it's filled with detailed laws about sacrifices, cleanliness, festivals, and ethical living. But at its heart, it answers a simple question: how can a holy God dwell among a people who are flawed and sinful? We can think of Leviticus in three main parts: sacrifices and offerings, instructions for approaching God with reverence and gratitude. Holiness and purity, rules for living a life that reflects God's character. Laws for community life, practical guidance for justice, fairness, and care for others. Even today, Leviticus teaches us that spirituality isn't just about what happens inside a church or temple, it's about how we live every day, in our homes, workplaces, and communities. It reminds us that God calls His people to be distinct, intentional, and holy in a world that often ignores Him. Sacrifices and offerings. Leviticus opens with detailed instructions about sacrifices, the ways the Israelites could approach God and maintain a relationship with Him. In a world without Jesus, these sacrifices were the central way to deal with sin, express gratitude, and celebrate fellowship with God. There were several main types of offerings, each with its own meaning. Burnt offerings, these were completely consumed by fire on the altar. They symbolized total surrender to God, a way of saying, "I give you my life fully, Lord." Grain offerings, made from flour, oil, or bread, these offerings represented giving back to God from what He had blessed the people with. They were acts of gratitude and recognition that everything ultimately comes from Him. Peace offerings, these were shared meals between the worshipper, the priests, and God. They symbolized fellowship and joy in God's presence. Sin and guilt offerings, these were made to restore a person's relationship with God after committing a sin. They showed that wrongdoing had consequences, but God provided a way to reconcile. It's important to note that these sacrifices weren't magic or superstition. They were intentional acts of worship, meant to cultivate humility, reflection, and obedience. God was teaching His people that coming before Him requires honesty about our hearts, willingness to surrender, and desire for restoration. For us today, while we don't offer animals or grain at an altar, the principle still applies. God calls us to approach Him with our whole hearts, to confess when we've done wrong, to live with gratitude, and to seek fellowship with Him and others. Sacrifice in modern life might look like giving time, serving others, or offering our talents for God's glory. Holiness and purity. One of the most repeated and powerful messages in Leviticus is, "Be holy, because I am holy." This isn't just a catchy phrase, it's the foundation of the book. God is perfectly holy, set apart from sin, and He calls His people to reflect that character in their daily lives. Leviticus explains holiness in very practical ways, covering both ritual purity and moral conduct. For example, clean and unclean foods. Certain animals were considered clean, others unclean. These rules weren't arbitrary, they helped the Israelites remember that God calls them to a distinct lifestyle, separate from surrounding nations. Bodily and ritual purity. Leviticus includes laws about disease, bodily fluids, and hygiene. These were not just for health, they symbolized spiritual cleanliness. God wants His people to approach Him with hearts and lives free from corruption. Sexual ethics. Laws about sexual behavior were given to protect families, communities, and the sanctity of life. They show that holiness is not just a ritual but also ethical and relational. The message is clear: holiness is both internal and external. It's about what we think, what we do, and how we treat others. God isn't impressed by outward ritual alone, He desires a heart aligned with His ways. Even today, we can apply this principle in practical ways, living with integrity in our workplaces and homes. Being honest and fair in relationships and business. Choosing actions that honor God, even when no one is watching. Leviticus teaches that holiness isn't just about following rules, it's about being transformed by God's character and reflecting that transformation in our daily lives. Laws for community life. Leviticus isn't only about individual holiness, it's also about how a holy people live together in community. God's laws extend beyond personal behavior and ritual, guiding justice, fairness, and care for others. Some key areas include justice and fairness. Leviticus emphasizes honesty in business, fair treatment of workers, and integrity in trade. Cheating, lying, or taking advantage of others is strictly forbidden. God desires a society where everyone is treated with dignity. Care for the poor and vulnerable. Laws about leaving the edges of fields for the poor, forgiving debts, and protecting widows and orphans show God's heart for the marginalized. The message is clear: holiness isn't just personal, it's visible in how we serve and protect others. Respecting others' property and boundaries. Theft, fraud, and disrespecting neighbors were considered serious offenses. Living in holiness means honoring the lives, property, and dignity of those around us. Festivals and Sabbaths. Leviticus outlines sacred times like the Sabbath, Passover, and Day of Atonement. These rhythms remind the community to rest, reflect, and celebrate God's goodness together. Worship isn't only personal, it's corporate and communal. The principle behind all these laws is simple: God's people reflect His character in every aspect of society. A holy life doesn't exist in isolation, it's expressed in fairness, compassion, and community care. Even today, we can apply these lessons, supporting and advocating for the vulnerable in society. Being honest and fair in work and business. Valuing rest, reflection, and community gatherings. Leviticus teaches that living in holiness is as much about relationships as it is about rituals. God calls His people to create a society that reflects His justice, mercy, and love. The role of the priest in Leviticus, the priests, all from the tribe of Levi, played a central role in connecting God and His people. They weren't just religious leaders, they were mediators, teachers, and spiritual guides for the entire nation of Israel. The book of Leviticus provides detailed instructions for priests on offering sacrifices. They were responsible for carrying out the rituals that allowed people to approach God. Maintaining the tabernacle was God's dwelling among His people, and priests ensured it remained pure and holy. Teaching the law, they helped the people understand God's commands and live according to His will. Priests were held to a higher standard of holiness because they represented God to the people. Their lives, actions, and obedience reflected God's character and allowed the community to draw near to Him safely. Leviticus also points forward to something greater, Jesus Christ, our ultimate high priest. Unlike the human priests who offered repeated sacrifices, Jesus offered Himself once for all, reconciling humanity to God. Every priest in Leviticus serves as a shadow of Christ, reminding us that God provides a way for us to be restored and in relationship with Him. For modern viewers, this teaches a few timeless lessons. Leadership carries responsibility and accountability. True spiritual guidance involves humility, service, and dedication. God provides access to Him, not through ritual alone, but through Jesus, who bridges the gap between humanity and God. Why Leviticus matters today? So, why does Leviticus matter to us today? At first glance, it might seem like a collection of ancient rules about sacrifices, cleanliness, and rituals, but the book carries timeless lessons about God, holiness, and community. God is holy and calls us to reflect Him. Leviticus reminds us that God's holiness is absolute. While we cannot be perfect, He calls us to live lives that reflect His character, through integrity, compassion, and moral choices. Worship is about the heart, not just rituals. The detailed sacrifices and offerings weren't meant to confuse or overwhelm. They taught Israel to approach God with sincerity, humility, and gratitude. Today, worship isn't about form, it's about the condition of our hearts. Community and justice matter. Holiness isn't just personal, it's expressed in relationships, business, and how we treat the vulnerable. Leviticus shows that living faithfully means creating a society marked by fairness, mercy, and care. God provides a way to be reconciled through the priesthood. Israel had access to God despite sin and imperfection. This points directly to Jesus, who bridges the gap between humanity and God once and for all. In short, Leviticus is not a book of strange rules, it's a guide to living in right relationship with God and others, showing that true holiness affects every part of life. Applying its lessons today means reflecting God's character in our daily decisions, seeking sincere worship and connection with Him, living justly, compassionately, and ethically in our communities. Leviticus challenges us to see that holiness isn't a burden, it's a pathway to life, restoration, and deeper relationship with God. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more videos explaining the Bible in a simple and modern way.